Greetings, greetings, greetings. Welcome to So Much to Talk About. My name is Nabaté Isles, and it's always a pleasure to feature facts and viewpoints on the world of sports. And this week is no different. I have the honor to have as a guest this gentleman who's one of the foremost journalists in sports, for sure, in the NFL. He's the NFL Insider for ESPN, and he's been associated with ESPN since 2011. And he started out actually as an NFC East blogger, and then he became the first beat writer for ESPN for the New York Football Giants. And he's had an extensive career. He's been in journalism for about 25 years. So his experience, his wealth of knowledge is incredible. And he's also written 2 novels, which I'm going to ask him about as well. So it's my pleasure and honor to have this gentleman who's one of the class acts in sports, Mr. Dan Graziano. How are you, sir?
I'm great, especially after an introduction like that. I appreciate it. That was awesome. How are you doing?
Oh, great. Everything's well, sir. Everything's well. And you and your family are hanging in throughout this bizarre time.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, good.
Hope the same for you as well.
Oh, no, thank you. Thank you. And how has life been different for you and your family? I know you do everything now. You don't go to Bristol anymore. You do everything from home pretty much. So how's that adjustment been for you and your journalism in general?
Well, this is a time of year, Nabaté, where we would be doing most of our work by phone anyway, leading up to the draft, coming out of the draft, and, OTAs and stuff like that. So in terms of what I'm doing day to day, it's not a lot different other than you mentioned. We're not in the studio. I'm not going to Bristol for shows. I'm not going to New York for shows, doing everything from right here as everyone else is. So it's been a little different. The show dynamic is obviously different when everyone's not sitting together in the same room, but we're still able to do the shows. And I think, what we're producing is the best we can do at the time. And the NFL's been good because the draft went off as it was supposed to in terms of timing, and the schedule released last night. I mean, so the NFL has kind of populated this empty sports calendar with some sort of real red meat, as you will. And I think it's been good for us in terms of being able to generate content. Now the question, of course, is how long we will have to do it before the NBA and Major League Baseball are able to get back and sort of put some games on at night. But it's been weird. But for me, I mean, look, I'm thankful. I know a lot of people are struggling and losing jobs or getting laid off and those kinds of things. So my complaints are minimal, all things considered.
Right, absolutely, and you've had such an extensive career in journalism. You started off in the South Florida area, Miami, with the Palm Beach Post, and covering the Miami Dolphins and Florida Marlins in the mid-'90s. And in 1995, one of the legendary figures in National Football League history, Mr. Don Shula, retired, and Jimmy Johnson ended up taking over the job with the Miami Dolphins. But Don Shula passed away a week ago. Talk about like when you moved into the Miami area to work and cover sports down there. What really resonated with you about Don Shula?
So I'm 22 years old. I'm about 6 or 8 months out of college, and I'm at the Palm Beach Post as an intern. So I got hired for a 4-month paid internship, and no promises after that. So I'm covering everything. They'll send me anywhere: spring training, baseball, Dolphins practice, Miami Heat practice, some high school track meet, whatever. And I'm 22. I don't know anybody, right? I moved down from New Jersey because of the job. So I'll work 16, 18 hours a day. And so they did send me out to some Dolphins practices as kind of the second guy out there for the paper, the beat writer, Pat McManaman, and then myself. And yes, that 95 season was Shula's last one. So he was the head coach. He was the guy that we assembled around and talked to every day and after every game. And yeah, quite a presence. I mean, certainly something that you don't forget. I mean, early in my career, I had the good fortune of being around some real giants like that. When I was in college at Georgetown, Big John Thompson.
John Thompson, yes,
sir. We would do basketball games and have to deal with him. I actually ran into him years later, and I would say about 9-10 years ago, and told him, he didn't remember me, of course, but he said to me in that big deep voice, he said, "I'll bet you got abused." And I said, "Yeah, I did. It helped me out, because then I could meet Don Shula and Jim Leland and all these guys that I'm covering when I'm in Florida." But yeah, Shula was definitely somebody you had to be sharp. If you asked a question that wasn't sharp, he was going to let you know about it in front of everybody, and he didn't mind.
Yes.
You know, he
like Greg Popovich.
Yeah, just that withering look, you know, and then the jaw. But yeah, I remember him very, very well. Look, classy guy. I mean, he never, you know, he was not a warm and fuzzy guy to cover. I didn't know him as well as maybe some others did, but certainly a guy that treated you the right way professionally, and obviously, as we've found out since his passing, had the respect of a large number of people throughout the game.
That's right. Wow. And then Jimmy Johnson took over right after.
Yeah,
how was that? Yeah. How was that experience with Jimmy?
I remember, like, Jimmy Johnson was like the big thing, right? Because now he had been at Miami and won, you know, coaching the college team, and then gone on and did what he did in Dallas. So it was like, if you're going to get somebody to replace Don Shula, this is literally the only choice. Mm-hmm. And it was such an incredible time in South Florida sports. Around that time, Pat Riley came to coach the Heat.
That's right.
You know, the Marlins won the World Series in '97. The Florida Panthers hockey team was in the Stanley Cup Finals. Yeah. So I mean, it was everything that could be going on in sports was going on there. And our paper was smaller than the Fort Lauderdale and the Miami Herald, but we covered all the same stuff. So you were right in the middle of it. If you were an intern, or if you were, you know, a rookie hired off the internship at 22 years old, as I was, they sent you everywhere. So I was at Dolphins games and Dolphins practices and Jimmy Johnson press conferences and all those kinds of things. And it was a crazy, crazy time to be around those teams.
Wow, absolutely. Here with ESPN NFL Insider, Mr. Dan Graziano, on So Much to Talk About. My name is Nabaté Isles. And now, Dan, the season, we don't know it's in state of flux with the NFL, what's going on with COVID-19, obviously. Do you see the season starting on time, training camp starting on time?
I personally think that it's impossible and kind of crazy to predict these kinds of things right now, because we don't know what's going to happen. The people I talk to in the NFL are optimistic that they'll be able to start the season on time, in part because they believe that over the next few months, there will be changes in the landscape involving the virus, right? There'll be maybe improvements in treatment, improvements in testing, those kinds of things, to the point where getting the virus in September might not mean what it meant in April. And that's obviously an ideal situation. Well, the ideal situation would be a vaccine, but that's apparently a ways off. So the ideal situation for the NFL is to get to a point where you can have teams together and practicing, where you can have maybe fans in the stands, but if not, then maybe stadiums at 30% capacity or 50%. So they're working through all of those possibilities while optimistically planning to start on time. And the schedule came out. In terms of training camps, they don't know. They're just, right now, they're dealing with the offseason programs and OTAs. They're going to reassess as of May 15th and see if they're able to start bringing people back to the facilities. Obviously, a lot of that could depend on where the facilities are located. Some states and some cities might be allowing things that others aren't. So they really are taking it step by step. I think from here, it looks like if there's improvement in the situation, if there's steady improvement over the coming months, I think it's reasonable to believe that there might be NFL football in the fall. But I mean, obviously, if things take a downturn and we're back where we were in mid-March, then obviously that calls everything into question. So very uncertain times, very difficult to make predictions. And I think right now where the NFL is just really assessing things sort of in 2-week blocks. All right, where do we stand? Let's reconvene 2 weeks from now, see where we stand and what we can do. And they're taking what's in front of them. They did the draft. They did, they just recently put out guidelines for when team facilities can reopen. Here's what the rules will be. And now they're going to work on how do you get players back in there and start practicing, if that's at all possible in the coming weeks and months. So that's kind of the way they're taking it bit by bit.
Good contingency plan by the NFL, definitely on the scheduling, putting, week 2 teams that have the same bye week. Yeah, that has that. And also what I like too, I don't know if I like this, but it would be intriguing if the Super Bowl ended up being played on February 28th, while the Oscars are on the same night. That would be very interesting.
I wonder how much overlap there is on those two audiences. That would be an interesting story to do, right? Figure out, would the Oscars move or no? Maybe they attract a different audience and that would be good for them. I don't know. Interesting. But we'll see. I mean, look, they could push the Super Bowl back. There's no question about it.
Yep.
It's just a matter of, do they have to? And they're able to do it. They could eliminate bye weeks. They could eliminate the bye week between the conference championships and the Super Bowl.
That's right.
All those kinds of things. So they're aware of those possibilities, and they've discussed them. And it may well be that several of them, or one of them, or none of them come into play. But as of now, a lot of uncertainty. NFL has an advantage. They have the advantage of time. They're going to be able to watch and see what the NBA does and what Major League Baseball does, and learn from the processes those sports go through if they're ultimately able to get back and playing here anytime soon. And so I think the NFL is aware that it's got that advantage, and they'll definitely learn from those things.
And I'm excited because now 7 playoff teams starting the 2021 playoffs coming up. Now that number 1 seed is going to be so important for sure.
No question about it. I mean, you think about only one team in each conference getting a bye, and you look at the Super Bowl. I mean, it's almost always teams that got a bye. So that's that's huge to only have to win 2 games instead of 3 to get to the Super Bowl. So yes, I think that's part of the reasoning for it. The competition for that 1 seed in each conference will be intense. It won't be just enough to get to the 2 as it has been in years past. So I think that's part of it. If somebody runs away and has a great year, you still want there to be some reason for them to be putting their best players on the field week 16, week 17.
Absolutely, for sure, especially fantasy football week 16. That's important.
Especially for fantasy football, which is a huge part of the business of the league, and then no one would tell you different.
That's right. My pleasure to talk with Dan Graziano here on So Much to Talk About. Second time he's been on the show, so pleasure to have him on once again. And Dan, wanted to speak with you about the scheduling with Seattle traveling 29,023 miles. But you had a great tweet, actually, which I really like, emphasizing that Seattle was 6-0 last year in the Eastern time zone, 21-9 in road games in the Eastern time zone since 2012. And that doesn't include the Super Bowl they won against Denver. Right. So, I mean, now talk about, can they continue that run? And also with the Ravens, does that give the Ravens a major advantage over only traveling 6,310 miles?
I think the travel is the big thing. Like when the schedule comes out every year, we all make a fuss, and it's exciting, but we already knew who everybody was going to play and whether it was home and road. So you're only finding out when. But what you do find out is how the travel works, right? Like, are you going to have back-to-back road games? Are you going to have long trip with another long trip the next week? So you find those things out. And look, if you're the Ravens and you don't have to go anywhere, that's to your benefit. I mean, these guys, if you've ever been, as I know you have, in an NFL locker room late in the season, you see these guys, they look like they've been through battle, right? So, I mean, like their bodies are just so beaten up. And so the idea of not having to drag your, they're not small people. They don't have to drag your 270-pound body on and off airplanes, in and out of hotel room beds, all that kind of stuff. So I think there's definitely an advantage for the teams that don't have to travel as much as the others. Seattle's always one of those teams that, because it's where they are, they have to go far just to play anybody. That's right. But yeah, that East Coast thing is not a fluke. They work at it. Like Pete Carroll has talked about this, about their program and how they make sure that they're prepared to play the East Coast games that are 10 a.m. Pacific time, the way the program they have in place. So no, I mean, the 6-0 last year, I just don't think was, look, some of them, they come and play teams that weren't maybe as good, but I mean, still it's a difficult thing to do. They did it. They went to London 2 years ago and beat the Raiders. So they're a team that travels well, and they're a team that builds that into their program because they know it's going to be a part of their lives every single year. And they want to make sure and maintain that edge. So I would not be, look, Seattle probably got the schedule and said, look, 4 1 o'clock Eastern time starts, no problem. We've done it before. We'll do it again. That's their mindset.
Wow. And for Tampa Bay, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, of course, all eyes are down at Raymond James Stadium throughout the season with Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski joining the team. Is the Super Bowl a bust for them this year?
Well, yeah. I mean, look, you don't go get Tom Brady for his age 43 season if you don't have designs on the Super Bowl. I mean, that's what Tom Brady does. He wins Super Bowls. So, yes, they are definitely going for it. Look, it's going to be tough. The Saints have won that division 3 years in a row. There's no reason to think the Saints won't have a very strong team again.
And the Falcons are improved, too.
The Falcons, I think, did a good job this offseason. And I mean, look, at the NFC, I mean, the 49ers are still going to be strong. I think it looks like the Cowboys will probably have a good team. The Eagles are always a factor. I mean, there's definitely hurdles to overcome. But, yeah, there's no question that Tampa Bay – look, when we're at the Combine, we start hearing Tampa Bay as one of the teams interested in Brady. The first reaction was Tampa Bay. But then what you were told was they think they're closer than you think they are, right? Because they like their defense. It's a little underrated, performed well last year. Elite receivers, two of them, and Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. So if you're trying to attract Tom Brady – they drafted a tackle. I think they're going to try and make a run, and it's fun to see. Look, if you're a fan of that team, if you're a fan of football in that region, it hasn't been very exciting for a while, and I think it's going to be good. I'm sure that their season ticket sales, I'm sure, have benefited all that, assuming people will be able to go to the games, of course. But I think Super Bowl or bust is the way. Bruce Arians, one of the older coaches in the league, like he'd like to win before he hangs it up again. So, this is definitely a win now team in Tampa Bay.
And a pro's pro when it comes to coaching and strategy. He's amazing coach for sure. Talking with Dan Graziano here, and so much to talk about. My name is Nabaté Isles, the great Dan Graziano, who's ESPN NFL Insider. So, Dan, the New York Giants, who had one of the best games of the year against Tampa Bay, that was exciting last year, and
it was.
Now the Giants, are they a team, because you covered the Giants for ESPN when you first got there and everything in your first couple of years. The Giants, can they make the playoffs? Because Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley, they built that offensive line, and the defense has a lot of good young talent, and they got some good free agent pickups, especially in Brooke Martinez, very underrated. So can the Giants be able to be that surprise team in the NFC?
You say surprise team. There's always teams that every year that are better than we think they're going to be, and teams that are worse than we think they're going to be. And I look at the Giants as a team that's still building it back up. But to your point, there are surprises. A lot of these games are close. If you lose a bunch of 5, 6, 7-point games one year, that might turn back your way the next year. So Daniel Jones showed a lot of promise. When Daniel Jones is throwing the ball, he looks great. The problem with Daniel Jones is the turnovers, right? The fumbles.
Right.
And if they can get that under control, big if. Some guys do, some guys don't. Mm-hmm. If they can get that under control, I think he has a very, very high ceiling in terms of franchise quarterback. Saquon Barkley, obviously already an elite player, one of the superstars of the league. And they drafted a tackle, number 4. They know they have to improve that offensive line if the offense is going to be as productive as they want it to be. On defense, I'm still a little concerned about who's going to rush the passer. I think that's an area they haven't really addressed the last couple off seasons. So we'll see if someone emerges. Marcus Golden had a good year for them last year. Maybe he comes back and does it again. But I think this is a team that needed a lot, that made some nice additions. And I think, I would be a little surprised if it was this year that they became contenders. Mm-hmm. Again, that doesn't mean they can. I'm surprised all the time. But I think they're building back the right way. And I do think Daniel Jones is a guy that has shown enough to make you think that he can be the guy to build around.
I thought he was the best rookie quarterback in the league. I mean, other than the turnover, if he did not have those turnovers, I thought he outplayed Kyler Murray for sure. Yeah, I felt like with throwing the ball. So,
yeah. I mean, again, they got to get that turnover thing figured out because it's a killer, and any coach would tell you.
So much to talk about with you, Dan. Hence the title of the show and everything. And now, which team do you see regressed this offseason, or is stagnant and should not be stagnant? Which team has really regressed to you going into 2020?
I think we would have probably said Minnesota after free agency, but maybe less so after the draft. I think they had a good draft. So, look, I think Carolina has has torn things down a little bit to rebuild, right? They give Matt Rule, the new head coach, the long contract. You move on from Cam Newton. They bring in Teddy Bridgewater. Luke Kuechly retires. They got rid of Greg Olsen. So there's a lot of sort of old guard guys moved. Not that Kuechly's old, but a lot of guys that were mainstays in Carolina that have moved on. Now they re-signed Christian McCaffrey, so they're building around him. So it's not like they're giving up. Right. But I think that's a team that is probably trying to position itself for some long-term success beyond this year, as opposed to necessarily, contending this year. And then I think the Jacksonville Jaguars, we've seen a talent drain there, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Yeah. And I think they'll move on eventually from Yannick Ngakoue and trade him at some point. So I think that's a team. Just a couple of years ago, they're in the AFC Championship.
Right.
And now I think there's like 2 or 3 guys left from that defense that are still with the team. So I think that's a team that is probably, getting near bottom before building it back up. And they're going to go with Gardner Minshew at quarterback, who had his moments last year, but was a late round pick for a reason. So we'll see if that works and whether Jacksonville is in the market for a quarterback at the top of next year's draft.
That's right, with Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields, those guys for sure. Dak Prescott, I mean, this situation is really getting ridiculous. I mean, what do you think will be the outcome by the time training camp starts?
Well, there's a July 15th deadline. If they don't sign him before July 15th, then they are not allowed to do a long-term contract with him until after the season. That's a rule that applies to all franchise players. So he'd be on the 1-year franchise tender, which I don't think it'd be an issue. I think he would play under it. It's $31 million. So he'd be fine. But look, they know they have until July 15th. There's not the offseason is going to be weird. It's not as if he's going to be missing practice time with his teammates because there isn't going to be any. So, there's talk about new coaching staff and new offense, but talking to people there, I don't think much is going to change about the offense. They kept the offensive coordinator and Mike McCarthy will make some changes, but I think they're going to keep it basically the same. So I think my sense is Dak Prescott will get a contract done with the Cowboys before that July 15th deadline. But the other thing right now to remember, and it's important to remember, he and his family are about 2 weeks removed from a terrible tragedy, which is the loss of his brother. Surprising. And so the Cowboys are obviously, giving him space. Nobody's calling Dak Prescott right now to say, why can't we get this contract done? Because they want his family to be able to mourn. And quite frankly, with 2 more months before that July 15th deadline, there's no reason to push it. So my understanding, talking to people on both sides of the situation, is that each side really believes the other wants to get it done. I mean, the Cowboys have offered Dak Prescott a lot of money, probably something in the $34 million a year range, 33, so it's a question of what the contract structure is going to be, how long it's going to be, how much money is guaranteed, when the guarantee pays out. It's a big, complicated deal. And I don't think there's a sense from either side of panic or disappointment that it hasn't been done yet.
On Mahomes, what is the ceiling for him? Could he possibly be in the tier of Peyton Manning and Tom Brady when it's all said and done?
Well, look, I mean, he's already won a Super Bowl, so he's halfway to what Peyton did. He's got 5 more to go to catch Brady. That could be inconceivable. But look, he's got the talent. There's no question about it. He's in the right situation with the coach, Andy Reid, who's the perfect coach for a quarterback with limitless ability to develop under. And I think that will continue to evolve their relationship and how that translates to the field. The next year or two, he's going to be on his rookie contract still. Well, really, this year, and then next year is the option. So he gets expensive starting in 2021. So this year they can still budget around the lower paid rookie quarterback who's performing at a high level, which is a great situation for the team to be in. So they're obviously going to try and hit that window, and then their salary cap challenge becomes a lot different starting in 2021 with his number going way up. But there's no question, if you look at his ability and the situation he's in, what they've done to put talent around him, the way they've drafted to keep young talent around him, not just signing free agents, but the receiver they drafted last year and the running back they drafted this year. Those are guys they think can be core pieces around him for a long time. So there's a long way to go. You can't diminish anything Brady or Manning did by assuming someone's next 10 or 12 years are going to be that good. But he's in the right spot, and he certainly seems like the right kind of young man, and he seems like certainly like he's got all the ability in the world. So, I mean, very, very exciting player, and certainly looking at a incredibly bright future as anyone who's watched him would imagine.
For sure. And that matchup with Lamar Jackson on Monday Night Football Week 3 is going to be something else.
We got some good games Monday Night Football this year, man. We got that ESPN schedule. Everybody should watch.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And Steelers and Giants, too. That's going to be exciting as well. So, yes,
Ben Roethlisberger's return from injury.
That's right. That's right. And too bad Eli Manning wasn't still around for them to tango one more time, Definitely. And, and one last question for you, Dan. Thank you for being on so much to talk about. Now, your 2 novels, The Ultimatum, and I think trying to tell me something.
I got them back here somewhere.
Yeah.
I think
Are you going to continue to do that? And are you thinking about
man.
screenwriting? Being a screenwriting.
So what happened is the first one I wrote, this before I was married and had kids, like I had time, right? So I wrote the first one in 2002, and it was amazing because I was covering the Yankees, and they were always in the World Series. But 2002, they lost in the first round. So I had all of a sudden I had 3-4 weeks where I had nothing to do when I was usually working. So actually, I did mention the 2002 Anaheim Angels in my acknowledgments because if they hadn't knocked off the Yankees in the first round, I don't know that book would have ever gotten finished.
Wow.
So I wrote that then, and I didn't have an agent. I didn't have a deal. I wrote it, and then I had the manuscript, and I tried to get it sold, and it worked out. And the publishing company signed me for 2 books, so I had to write the other one. And I wrote that in 2005, and but yeah, it's that was 15 years ago, wasn't it? And I haven't written one since. But when I was a kid and I fell in love with writing, that's what I thought I would do. I thought I'd write books, write novels. And so the fact that I did it,
that's right.
And the day that I went to the bookstore and saw my book on the shelf, like that was an incredible moment for me that I'll never, ever forget. Even if I never write one again, the feeling of accomplishment was tremendous. But yeah, I would love to do it again. I mean, it's maybe this off season settles down and I'm still stuck in the house for a while, and you never know what could come out of that, especially now that the kids are off in their rooms doing their own thing. But yeah, it was fun. They didn't sell enough that I could retire on it. I still have boxes of them in my basement here that never sold. But I mean, I love talking about them. I had so much fun writing them. The thrill of getting them published. It was a great experience.
And I'll buy both copies for sure for each of your
I think
books.
they're pretty cheap right now. I think you can get them probably for $1 on Amazon or wherever. So yeah, or if you can't, let me know and I'll send you a couple.
All right, no doubt. And it's funny, my favorite writer, of all time, Richard Price, great novelist, and he became a great screenwriter, too. Yeah. So that's something, remember, that's something you can adapt your own books.
Never know. You never know.
You don't have to worry about the being able to get permission to adapt those.
Right.
So, yeah. Well, Dan Graziano, I want to thank you for being on So Much to Talk About once again. Always a pleasure and great to know you for almost 10 years. We met when I was producing ESPN radio and everything. Wow. And such an honor to be with you, and congratulations on all your success. It's much deserved. Definitely.
Nabaté, thank you very much. The pleasure is mine.
Excellent. Well, thank you for watching So Much to Talk About. See you all next week. Be blessed, everybody. Bye-bye.